Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. For me, it's morning for you. I think it's already after lunchtime at the moment. Today, we'll tell you a little bit more about my research. The main focus of the presentation today is about how we can measure consumers' food experience. So that's a little bit the angle they have taken. And it's mainly based for parts based upon my PhD research, but then at the end I also go a bit further. So you can also see a bit more about how we at a lot of European universities try to build up our research, our PhD research more in particular. Because it's also quite important to know that. So for us, it's also really important to have like publications, more even publications that are like indexed in journals and Web of Science. I think that's also something I wanted to illustrate here for my research. We can show a little bit how we see that. So let's start. The title was also with food product experience, but you can wonder what does that mean? What do we understand under the principle of food product experience? Well, from my angle, and that's a bit how I see it, but also how it has been seen in literature, is on one part you have the product itself. A food product, it has certain characteristics, it has certain sensory attributes, so things that you can experience using your human senses, like the taste that you have, the smell that it has, a certain texture, the appearance of chocolate, for instance. All those things have an impact on how you experience a product. But you can go broader. And by going broader, we can also think about the conceptualizations that people will link to food products when they are seeing food products or even when they are consuming food products. And for those conceptualizations, there are three different types of that. First of all, you have emotions. For instance, if I eat a piece of chocolate, it will make me happy. It can also calm me down and so on. I can feel guilty. So emotions are first part of conceptualizations. A second part or type of conceptualizations are functional conceptualizations. For instance, I just went out for a run. Or it's an early morning today, and I need something. I need some coffee, so it will wake me up. So I will have a full of waking me up. For a run, yeah, I just had like 5 minutes of running to get here in the office. And like a glass of water might also be nice just to refresh me. So then you can think, okay, it will refresh me. So it's also functional conceptualization. And the last part of the last type of conceptualizations are abstract conceptualizations, which is that, for instance, a conceptualization for that's expensive, or I really trust that food product, it's trustworthy, it's sophisticated, and so on. So those are another types of conceptualizations. When we see, of course, the research and also the research that I have done, for a PhD, you need to make choices. You're not able to do everything. So what I did was focusing on emotions. It's also relevant because a lot of food products link that. I think everyone knows this example here from Coca-Cola. Open a Coke, open happiness. They really succeeded to try with marketing so that people will link their product, Coca-Cola, with happiness. So it's something that you can also use even as a marketing tool. So those conceptualizations, the feelings that people will attach when you focus more on emotional conceptualizations, can also be an asset for a product to distinguish you compared to other products. So that's also something that's really caught my attention. That was also a reason for me to follow more into this, to throw this more up, so we can also see this more into detail and also see the applications that are there. Okay, so and then going broader, the idea was to examine a little bit more about the information and context effects on consumers' food experience. So we establish what we understand on the consumer's food experience, so both the emotions and then those conceptualizations, both the sensory attributes and then both the conceptualizations under which I focus mostly on emotions. And you can then go steps beyond that and also see, okay, what are the information effects that play a role, and what are, for instance, the effects of doing a test of consuming a food product, for instance, in a lab or in a certain environment like at home or in a restaurant, a bar, and so on. And then the idea of the main study that I will present here was, okay, how can we balance that a little bit? How can we contribute to science, but also to the food industry? And that's also what you can see here with the picture, with the person that is like a bit like trying to balance those different pieces of popcorn. And those pieces of popcorn, what you can see here, they have, of course, sensory attributes. They can be sweet, crunchy, yellow, sticky. There's also certain emotions attached to that, to those popcorn pieces. Also, enjoyment, happy, and guiltiness can even occur. So the idea there is, okay, how can we balance that from a scientific point of view, and also then that's also of course interesting information for food industry when they try to see how they will make their products on one hand, but also how they will look to market them. Um, so that was a little bit the idea. Now, a question for everyone here online: does anyone has an idea about how much products fail? So you can just put it in the chat, some numbers about the amount of products that fail. So that with that I mean like, okay, let's say after 1 year, you have new products on the shelves. After 1 year, they're out of the shelves. How many products are no longer in the shelves after 1 year? Anyone that has an idea? So you can just share your thoughts here in the chats, or you can always just let me know here. Feel free to speak out. Quite silent there.
I would say maybe less than a year for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe around months, like 6 months.
No, but I mean more the percentage. So if you have like
All right,
100%, it means that everything succeeds, or that everything fails. So that after 1 year, nothing is there anymore, and with zero, everything is still in the market after 1 year. So I'm looking more for the numbers. So how many products fail? So how many products are no longer in the shelves after 1 year? Which percentage should we
percentage.
consider? Yeah.
Akan 77.
Can you repeat that? Yeah. Sorry.
Apa? Katanya? 7.
I would maybe take a guess like more than 50% of the whole
Yeah.
product that on the shelf, but may got
Yeah.
failed after a year on the shelf.
Yeah.
Like
That's
half
already good.
of it.
Yeah, that's already good direction, but that's still quite low even. So if you look to the
Really?
numbers, if you look to the numbers, and that's a little bit my main reason also here, we get 80 to 90% of new food products that fail or reformulated
Wow.
products that fail. So that's quite big. And that's also why the angle of sensory science is interesting, because you can already think about this. If about let's say 80 to 90% fail, that means that companies have put a lot of effort in first of all developing those products, but then also making it on a large scale, then marketing everything, and in the end, 8 or 9 times out of 10, they need to get it back, and it's just a waste of money. So the idea of that, it's really okay. Let's use something to try to have a lower failure rate. So that's something that is interesting for the food industry. But on the other hand, it's also interesting for science because we know there are different challenges that also mean that you need to have different food products. For instance, if you think about obesity, there's a big challenge there. We need to like develop like products with lower calories. On the other hand, we have sustainability. We try to develop also products that are more sustainable, or like also some kind of research I do, looking for like the potential of using insects as food ingredients. Also for that, if a lot of products fail, that means that a lot of research is done for something that is not that interesting or that finally doesn't really survive long. So the idea there is to use something to lower those failure rates. And one of the possibilities to do that is work with sensory evaluation. So using the human senses, so the sight, also the ears, so what you hear, the smell, what you taste, and also your touch, to see, okay, to evaluate products and hope to lower those. We know from data from market research agencies that if you use sensory evaluation, that they're able to drop those failure rates to about 60%. And if they are even able to, to perform sensory tests more in a realistic context, more in a realistic eating environment, I would say, then even they can drop those failure rates to about 30%. So that means that there can be a huge, loss of money prevented just by carrying out sensory evaluation. And so why this kind of field is so interesting, because in the end you can develop new food products, you can have all those nice things, those nice studies, but in the end somebody needs to consume it in food sciences. And the sensory evaluation can help to lower those failure rates and to see more, okay, which products will normally or have a bigger chance to make it on the market. Now, how do we carry that out? Typically we will carry that out in sensory lab. You can see here a picture, just on the screen. Big sensory labs. That means that people are individually seated in several, we call it booths, like several small places where they're set, and they just evaluate the food products with the software, with the questionnaire, and so on, and they taste everything and they give their opinions. So that's the standards. And what we will use there, we will mostly use, at least from a historical point of view, an overall liking scale from 1 to 9. So you can see that here, how much you will like sample 142. And then you see there, it ranges from 1, dislike extremely, to 9, like extremely. And that's the scale that is most often used in sensory science with consumers. And that's then how it typically goes, also went back in the days. So people are seating, consumers are invited to take part, they sit in the booths and they just evaluate the different samples just with the overall liking scores. And in the end, companies and also scientists use those information to further develop products and for the science. Of course, I want to do something else. I want to look to, okay, how can we improve that? Because we know that still, although we do some social science, still products fail. So that means that we're not able to catch everything with the current practices. So my idea was, okay, let's go broader than just focusing on overall liking, but also having those food experience evaluated by consumers. So that means on one hand, the sensory attributes, you can see it here. So you just have, like, for example, that you ask them, okay, to which extent are products, are those attributes applicable? So that's one thing I want to add. And on the other hand, I also want to have, of course, those emotional conceptualizations. So to ask people which conceptualizations are also applicable when they were evaluating a food product. So that was one thing that I want to do. So one improvement. So focus on overall liking. Another thing is, of course, normally we work with sensory evaluation with blind labeled products in a lab. So that means that people are just, what you already can saw before, they are just seeing like 4 or 5 samples and they just have digital codes and they are asked, like, okay, please taste now sample 151 and how much do you like it? And then they scale it from 1 to 9. And that's it. They don't have any additional information. Well, we all know that if you go to the grocery shopping, you see they're not just products with 3-digit codes. No, you see brands, you see packages, and so on. And we know from a marketing perspective that also have an impact on what people will choose. So the current sensory practices with those brand labels, they're good if we really want to focus on the product itself. But when people just eat food or consume food, there's more than that. So I wanted to go beyond that and also to see a little bit, okay, what can we measure there? Can you also add some information on one hand? On the other hand, okay, can we have a look also to make those evaluations not only in the lab, but also to do it, for instance, with people at home? So you can see here, but of course from Belgium, we're quite proud of our beers, with like beers that they evaluated at home. So there are 2 objectives that I had. First of all, look to make a user-friendly method for combining both those emotional and sensory profiling by consumers, because what you have already seen before, they're quite long lists. On the other hand, I want also to study a little bit more about what is the effect of information on one hand, and also the context, so where people will evaluate the products on how they will experience then the food products using that newly developed methods.
I apologize for the interruption. You have 5 minutes
Yeah.
left with the presentation.
Oh, that's short.
I know. Sorry.
Okay, then I'll focus a little bit here more on. So what I did then was like developing a wheel format that combines both sensory evaluations or sensory terms and also on emotions. And that was untested. I will go a bit beyond this. Tested with 2 experiments. On one hand with burgers, and on the other hand also with vanilla pudding. Not that important, but one was more about like lab, other one was in consumer fair. And what did you saw there? If you see here for the first experiment with burgers, you see here, you see on one hand the different burgers, burger A, B, C, and you see a lot of different, I would say, asterisks that indicate there are significant differences. That means that the tool was able to catch significant differences for both, on one hand, the emotions. So you see that here in the beginning, like pleasant surprise. On the other hand, also, the sensory attributes. So those 2 things, were able to be measured with that new tool that has been developed by us. Then with the vanilla pudding, we go a step beyond, because there it was also more like an heuristic environment. And what see we there? Also here with the emotional terms, but also with the sensory terms, we see there are a lot of significant differences. So the tool that has been developed, it worked well. We were able to have to discriminate between different samples, even when they're quite similar, when they have quite a similar liking. So you can see here the mean liking was each time around 5 to 6. So there are no significant differences there, but still you're able to grab differences in both emotions and also in sensory terms. This is less important. We also asked the people how they perceived the tool, and it was quite perceived well, so not that tedious and also quite easy to collaborate, so that emotion sensory will, so combining emotion and sensories, and they can just work with that. And I will go to the validation part to end with. So we first developed that tool, and the second experiment, the idea was then, okay, can we also see that if it really works well? Does it work similar like the regular format? So we have the wheel, and then you can compare to the list format. And the second experiment was on, okay, to which extent does the emosensory wheel, does it have an impact on that hedonic liking from 1 to 9? Because we don't want that it has an impact, of course. We want that the wheel doesn't impact how people will say how much they like a product. And then what we have seen for the first study, comparing the wheel versus the list-based, that the results were quite similar. You can see it here, 13 to 14 differences for the emotions. For the sensory term, 6 for if you use the RATA method, RATA S, it means also that they scored how much they found to be applicable, 9 to 11. So it's quite similar. So the questionnaire format and the list didn't really make an impact. The wheel and the list-based format was the same. So both for yogurt and chocolate. So we worked there with 2 products to really confirm those findings. And then the second experiment was to see if there was an impact on the hedonic liking. And there we see, if you see here the highest p-value, you see there that there wasn't really an impact. So the p-value was over 0.05. So that means that there was no impact if people also saw or also used the emosensory wheel to evaluate the food product. So with a score of 0.4110 and 0.157. And that was for both product types, both studies for both for chocolate and yogurt valid. And then the main conclusions here was that we were able to discriminate with that new tool for consumers for between the different products for both the emotional and sensory profiles. And we also saw that a lot of consumers preferred the wheel questionnaire format. And we also saw in the end that there was no impact on the overall liking measurements. Okay.
Sorry again to interrupt. Sorry again to interrupt. You have 5 minutes extra because your study is very interesting. I think you can go on.
Okay. So then I will go to the brand and context effect. So there are 3 studies that we performed. I will focus here only on one because, of course, there's little time. So the idea was here we give people information about the brand, and we also did the study to and 2 different locations. So some people evaluated the products at home, other people evaluated products in the lab. So that's also published here. You can see it here, but I can also send you later on. So what did they do? People evaluated the products, 5 samples of strawberry yogurt 3 times. First of all, they evaluated blind, so they had no information and they tasted the things. In the second step, 1 week after that, they were asked to come back and just were asked how much do you think that you will like the sample, and also to evaluate the emotions and the sensory that they would link to each sample. And then the third step was with information. So 1 week behind that, so after about 2 to 3 weeks, they came again back, the participants, and were asked, okay, how do you expect, how much you like the sample, and they were known also the brand. We worked there with 5 product samples, 2 premium brands, but also 3 private label brands. You can see them here, they're not that important. For the private label brands, they're just the major retailers here in Belgium. And then we did the test both in the lab. In the lab, there were 53 participants, and then another group of participants, 46, did the same study at home. And what do we see here? For the overall liking, quite interesting. There was a difference there in how they were discriminating. So for the people at home, in the lab first, we see there that there was only a difference there when there was a blind evaluations. So that means that when people were evaluating the products in the lab and they get no information about the brand, they're able to discriminate based upon the overall liking. So for instance, private label 2, so CPL2, it has a score of 6.5, and that was like significantly higher than, for instance, private label brand 3. While if we give them the brand information, apparently in the lab context, people didn't distinguish them anymore. They are all equally liked. So for private label brand 2, you see it's 6.1, and for private label 3, it's 5.8. So they got more into the medium, I would say, and that's quite interesting to see. Well, when people did it at home, and in home, they were asked to do the same test, so not the same people, but another group did the test. But they're also allowed to have like other people from their household to participate and to collaborate with them. And what you see there, it's the other way around. So instead of being in blind, being able to discriminate between the samples based upon liking, you see that wasn't the case. So people liked each sample the same when they didn't really have information of the brand. But when people at home, which is really a realistic environment to consume a food product, to consume yogurt, well, then there was a difference. So then they liked certain samples more than the others. And that's quite interesting because that means that when you do studies in the lab, it can be, depending on the type of product, that there will be different results compared to when you do it at home or another context. So that was just for the liking, but we also saw that for the emotions and for the sensory, you can see it here, for instance, in the band condition. Emotions, 5 different terms that were significant different in the lab, and home 1. For informed condition, only 2 and then 0. And for the sensory part, there also quite some difference there. So in the lab, there was more difference also in the blind condition. It was quite similar in the informed condition. Well, for the home condition, there was a lot of difference there at home and a lot more in the informed condition. So for the general conclusions, and then I might maybe end. When we worked with this tool, it was quite interesting. So this tool has been developed by me and some colleagues here. And we see that's a consumer-friendly way to combine both those emotional conceptualizations and the sensory attributes in a single tool. And it also is like something that people enjoy to do. If you combine that, you can have some new insights, both for scientists and industry. And we also saw that information has an impact. You see it here for brands, but we also saw the same when we worked with like content information, like what was the composition of the product, but also for like health information, that also has an impact. And also we see the last thing, that the context has an impact also on how people will perceive the overall liking, but also on the emotional profiling. So we see that the context has mainly an impact on the emotional profiling, and it has not really a big impact on the sensory profiling. when they were tasting the samples. Okay, maybe that's it. There was still a last part, but I don't think I have the time here. And it was like, okay, instead of just using words, in my current research, I'm going beyond words and also using some emoji, yeah, to have more differences and see what brings that